September 1989, the San Sebastian Film Festival. Cameras rolling, crowd applauding, and somewhere in that golden Spanish light, an old woman is walking alone down a red carpet. She is 81 years old. One side of her face droops from a stroke that should have killed her. Her body hollowed out from surgery, from radiation, from years of fighting a war. Her own cells declared against her. No studio behind her, no publicist, no husband, no daughter. Just her, just a walk, just the light. The crowd rises, because even now, even like this, there is something in the way Bette Davis moves that makes it impossible to look away. Something that says, I'm still here, and you will remember me whether you want to or not. 3 weeks later, she will be dead, in a hotel room in France, alone. Nobody in Hollywood ever asked the real question. Not how the greatest actress who ever lived spent her final years, but why did she have to spend them like this? Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I am your host, and this is Hollywood's darkest archive, Lowell, Massachusetts, 1908, a mill town. The kind of place where the sky in winter sits low and gray and the cold gets into your bones before you even step outside. It is here, in a modest house on a street that history forgot, that Ruth Elizabeth Davis is born. The first daughter of Harlow Davis, a patent attorney with cold eyes and colder ambitions, and Ruth Favor Davis, a woman made entirely of dreams she could never quite reach. From the very beginning, the household runs on tension. Harlow is a man who measures everything, including love. Ruth, the mother everyone called Ruthie, is his opposite in every way. Warm and reckless and hungry for something she cannot name. They are two people who should never have married, bound together by two daughters in a slowly rotting silence. Then one morning in 1918, Harlow Davis picks up his hat, walks out the front door, and does not come back. Bette is 10 years old. There is no dramatic scene, no shouting, no final goodbye that a child could hold on to and examine later, turning it over like a stone to find meaning underneath. He simply leaves. And in leaving, he teaches his oldest daughter the first and most permanent lesson of her life, that love is conditional, that people disappear, and that the only way to make certain someone can never abandon you is to make yourself impossible to forget. Ruthie does not collapse. She picks herself up with the particular dignity of a woman who has no choice, takes her two daughters, and begins moving. From Lowell to Newton to New York, chasing work, chasing stability, chasing the version of life she had always believed was waiting for her somewhere just around the next corner. She takes up photography. She enrolls the girls in boarding school in the Berkshires. She does what she has to do, but somewhere in the mathematics of survival, something shifts between mother and daughter. Ruthie begins to see in Betty not just her child, but her second chance. The girl is electric. She has a presence. She walks into a room and something changes in the air. Ruthie feels it, and she makes a decision quietly without ever saying it out loud, that this daughter will live the life she herself never got to live. It is a beautiful kind of love. It is also a crushing one. Betty grows up understanding that she is not simply loved, she is needed. She is her mother's entire investment. Every drama class, every school production, every small moment of applause carries the weight of Ruthie's unlived dreams pressing down from above. The girl does not have the luxury of failure. Failure would mean abandonment, and she has already learned what abandonment looks like. At Cushing Academy in Ashburnham, Massachusetts, she began to act, and something extraordinary happens. The girl who was too thin, too intense, too strange for the pretty girl world of 1920, New England discovers that on stage, none of that matters. On stage, strange is a weapon. Intensity is a gift. The audience does not look away. For the first time in her life, Bette Davis feels seen. She graduates and sets her eyes on New York, on Broadway, on the kind of future that would make a father regret ever walking out the door. In 1928, she landed a role in The Earth Between, a small stage production that gave her her first real taste of a professional audience. It is not much, but it is enough to confirm what she already suspects about herself. She followed it with a tour in The Wild Duck, And then, in November 1929, Broken Dishes opened on Broadway and ran for 6 months. The reviews are kind. The phone begins to ring. Hollywood calls in 1930 Universal Pictures. A screen test, a contract, and a one-way ticket to a city built entirely on illusion. The executives at Universal look at her and see nothing. She is not Garbo, she is not Crawford, she does not have the soft, yielding beauty that the camera of that era was designed to worship. One studio man famously looks at her arrival footage and asks, with genuine confusion, whether the girl has any sex appeal at all. She does not get the roles she wants. She gets the leftovers, the thankless parts, the forgettable films that come and go without leaving a mark on anyone. After 6 films, Universal drops her contract without ceremony, the way you throw away something that never quite worked. Bette Davis is 23 years old, standing in Hollywood with nothing, and the city is already trying to tell her she does not belong here. She's about to prove every single one of them wrong. But the road from this moment to greatness will not be paved with luck or charm or the right connections. It will be paved with something far more dangerous, a rage so quiet and so controlled that by the time Hollywood understands what she has done, she will already own them. The only question is what it will cost her to get there. Warner Brothers, 1932. A phone call that changes everything. Bette Davis is sitting in a rented room in Hollywood with her mother, 2 suitcases, and a career that is already being written off by people who never took the time to actually watch her work. Universal has dropped her. The auditions are going nowhere. She is on the edge of packing everything up and going back to New York, back to the stage, back to the life where at least someone could see what she was capable of. Then actor Murray Kinnell makes a phone call to Warner Brothers on her behalf. A small favor from a colleague. The kind of thing that happens 100 times a week in Hollywood and leads to nothing. Except this time, it leads to the man who played God. The film is not a masterpiece, but Bette Davis is. The critics notice. Warner Brothers notices. They sign her to a contract, and for the first time since she arrived in this city, she has a studio behind her name. What follows is a slow and maddening climb. Warner Brothers is not a generous house. It is a machine, and inside a machine, every part has a function. The function they assign to Bette Davis in these early years is simple. Show up, say the lines, look presentable, do not cause trouble. The roles they give her are thin. Women who exist to be pretty backdrops for male heroes. Women who suffer quietly and disappear by the final reel. She does the work. She cashes the checks. And behind those famous eyes, something is building. Then comes of human bondage. It is 1934. RKO is adapting Dayu, Somerset Maugham's novel, and they need someone to play Mildred, a coarse, manipulative working-class waitress who destroys a man who loves her and feels absolutely nothing about it. Every major actress in Hollywood passes on the role. The character is repellent. She is selfish, cruel, and utterly unsympathetic. Playing her would mean looking ugly on screen, speaking in a harsh Cockney accent, and spending 2 hours making audiences despise you. Bette Davis reads the script and immediately wants the part. She begs Warner Brothers to loan her to RKO. They are reluctant. This is not the kind of film that makes money. This is not the kind of role that builds a career. But she pushes, and eventually they let her go. What she does with Mildred is something that Hollywood in 1934 is simply not prepared for. She does not soften the character. She does not look for the sympathetic angle. She plays Mildred as exactly what she is, vicious and small and terrifyingly real. In her death scene, ravaged by tuberculosis, she refuses the makeup department's attempts to keep her presentable. She insists on looking the way a dying woman actually looks, hollow, destroyed. Honest. The film opens, and the reviews are unlike anything written about a Hollywood actress in years. The New York Times calls her performance extraordinary. Critics who have spent a decade watching women perform femininity on screen suddenly find themselves watching a human being. She does not receive an Academy Award nomination. Studio politics, backroom dealings. The particular cruelty of an industry that could not quite decide whether to reward a woman for refusing to be decorative. The snub caused enough public outrage that the Academy quietly changed its nomination rules the following year. But Warner Brothers gets the message. The following year, they give her Joyce Heath in Dangerous, a role tailored to the force they now understand they have under contract. She plays an alcoholic, self-destructive actress burning herself down from the inside. She won the Academy Award for Best Actress. Standing at the podium, she says almost nothing of note publicly. Privately, she calls it a consolation prize for the year they robbed her. She is right, and she knows it. And she accepts the statue anyway, because Bette Davis has always understood that in Hollywood, you take what they give you with one hand and you take what they owe you with the other. By the late 1930s, she was the biggest female star at Warner Brothers. Jezebel in 1938 brought her a second Oscar. Dark Victory in 1939 confirms what everyone already knows. The studio that once looked at her screen test and shrugged is now building entire productions around her name. She is at the peak. She is the queen. What nobody talks about in all the profiles and the magazine covers and the breathless studio press releases is what it actually takes to sustain this, the punishing schedule. The roles she fights for and the roles she is forced to accept. The contracts that give Warner Brothers the right to loan her out, suspend her, and shape her public image like clay. The crown is real, but so are the bars around it, and Bette Davis, who has never in her life accepted a cage without testing every wall, is about to test this one in a way that will shake the entire studio system to its foundation. There is a contract sitting on a desk at Warner Brothers in 1936 that Bette Davis is no longer willing to honor. She has read it carefully, the way you read something that was designed to be too long and too dense for anyone to actually finish. And what she finds inside is not a professional agreement between a studio and an actress. It is a document of ownership. Warner Brothers can assign her any role they choose. They can loan her to other studios without her consent. They can suspend her without pay if she refuses a part. They can extend her contract for every week she spends suspended, effectively trapping her in an endless loop of servitude with no exit point she can reach on her own. She is the biggest female star in Hollywood. She has 2 Academy Awards on her shelf. And she has less control over her own working life than the janitor who mops the floors of the soundstage every night after the cameras stop rolling. In 1936, she refused 2 roles she considered beneath her. Warner Brothers suspends her without pay, as the contract allows. Then a producer in England offers her 2 films outside the studio system, and Bette Davis does something that nobody in Hollywood expects from a woman in 1936. She gets on a boat and goes. Jack Warner's response is immediate and furious. He files an injunction in the British courts to prevent her from working for anyone else. The case goes to trial in London. The judge reads the contract, listens to the arguments, and rules in Warner Brothers' favor. The contract is upheld. She is ordered to return. She loses, on paper. But the press covers the trial with the kind of breathless attention usually reserved for murder cases. And when audiences read about a woman standing up in a British courtroom to argue that a Hollywood contract constitutes a form of legal slavery, something shifts. The conversation about how studios treat their talent changes. Not immediately, not completely, but the crack is there, and it never fully closes again. Warner Brothers quietly, and without ever admitting the connection, begins offering her better roles. They pay her legal fees. They renegotiate the terms. The woman who lost the lawsuit somehow walks away with more than she had before she filed it. What the press does not cover is what that fight costs her internally. The years of grinding through bad roles. The exhaustion of spending every professional relationship as an adversarial negotiation. The particular loneliness of being the person in the room who refuses to pretend that everything is fine when everything is not fine. She throws herself into work because work is the only place where the terms are clear. On set, she knows exactly who she is and what she's doing. Off set, everything is more complicated. Her personal life in these years reads like a series of auditions for a happiness she can never quite land. Her first husband, Harmon Nelson, the band leader she met at Cushing Academy, cannot survive the gravitational pull of her ambition. The marriage ended in 1938. Her second husband, businessman Arthur Farnsworth, is the one people speak about in quieter tones. In August 1943, he collapsed on a Hollywood street. He died 2 days later. He's 41 years old. The official cause of death is a fractured skull from the fall. But the medical examiner's report notes evidence of a prior skull fracture, one that predates the fall by weeks. Nobody explains how it got there. The investigation is brief. The case is closed. In an era when studios routinely called in favors with the Los Angeles Police Department to make inconvenient stories disappear, the speed with which Arthur Farnsworth's death stops being a story is its own kind of answer. Bette Davis does not speak publicly about what happened. She never will. She married again in 1945, this time to artist William Grant Sherry. They have a daughter, Barbara, known as B.D. The marriage deteriorates into a documented pattern of volatility and misery. They divorce in 1950. Then comes Gary Merrill, her co-star in All About Eve, the film that in 1950 reminds the entire world exactly what Bette Davis is capable of when given material worthy of her. They marry the same year the film is released. She is 42. She adopts 2 children with him. For a moment from the outside, it looks like something resembling stability. It is not stable. Merrill is difficult. The marriage is loud and punishing in the way that 2 people with enormous egos and unresolved damage tend to be loud and punishing together. They divorce in 1960. Bette Davis is 52 years old, 4 marriages deep, and the roles have begun to dry up. In the way they always dry up for women in Hollywood once they cross a certain age and a certain level of inconvenience. In 1962, she did something that no star of her magnitude has ever done publicly. She takes out an advertisement in the trade publication Variety. It reads, in its entirety, mother of 3, divorcee, American. 30 years experience as an actress in motion pictures, mobile, still, and more affable than rumor would have it. I want steady employment in Hollywood. A woman who won 2 Academy Awards, a woman who changed the legal framework of Hollywood studio contracts. Advertising herself for work in a trade magazine like a secretary looking for a job. The ad works, in a manner of speaking. What it lands her in is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a low-budget horror film in which she plays a grotesque, delusional former child star who terrorizes her wheelchair-bound sister. Her co-star is Joan Crawford, a woman she has spent 30 years in a state of open warfare with. The relationship between Davis and Crawford is one of Hollywood's most mythologized feuds, but the mythology tends to flatten what was actually a complex and ugly dynamic between 2 women who were pitted against each other by a system that had no interest in letting them exist as anything other than rivals. Studios played them against each other for roles. The press manufactured hostility between them for copy. And both women, with their own damage and their own pride and their own very real grievances, obliged by performing the feud with more commitment than either of them probably intended. On the set of Baby Jane, the hostility is real and physical. Davis tells interviewers that Crawford wears weighted clothing during scenes where Davis has to drag her across the floor, deliberately making herself heavier to exhaust her co-star. Crawford denies it. Nobody can verify it. What is verifiable is that the film is a massive commercial success, that it resurrects both of their careers simultaneously, and that when the Academy Award nominations are announced, Bette Davis receives one, and Joan Crawford does not. Crawford's response is to campaign actively against Davis in the lead-up to the ceremony, contacting every nominee who is unable to attend and offering to accept the award on their behalf. Anne Bancroft wins for The Miracle Worker. Crawford walks to the stage to collect the award that was never hers. Bette Davis watches from somewhere off camera. It is the most on-brand moment in the history of Hollywood. 2 women reduced to performing cruelty for an industry that built its entire mythology on exactly this kind of spectacle. Then, 1985. A Tuesday morning in a rehabilitation facility in New England where Bette Davis is learning to walk again for the second time in 3 years. A nurse brings her a copy of a book published by her daughter, B.D. Hyman. The title is My Mother's Keeper. It describes in detail and for public consumption a childhood defined by a mother who was an alcoholic, a bully, and an emotional abuser. Bette Davis reads it while relearning how to hold a pen. People who are present in those weeks describe her as unnervingly calm, not the calm of acceptance or forgiveness, the calm of a woman who has been preparing for this particular blow her entire life without knowing it. The daughter she had with her third husband, the child she raised largely alone, the person she loved, in whatever complicated way Bette Davis was capable of loving anyone. She sits with the book for a long time. She looks out the window. And then she says, quietly, to no one in particular, "You should always listen to your mother. She never speaks to BD again." There is a particular kind of loneliness that belongs only to people who were once very famous. It is not the loneliness of obscurity. It is worse than that. It is the loneliness of a person who can still remember exactly what it felt like to matter, standing in a world that has quietly decided to move on without them. By the mid-1980s, Bette Davis knew this loneliness the way she knew her own reflection. The body has begun its long betrayal. In 1983, at the age of 75, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. The mastectomy is scheduled and completed. 9 days later, before the wound is properly healed, she suffers a massive stroke. The left side of her face goes slack. Her speech becomes slow and labored. The physical therapy is brutal. The kind of daily grinding work that breaks people half her age and twice her health. She does not break. She learns to speak again. She learns to walk again. She sits in rehabilitation rooms, surrounded by people who treat her with a careful, slightly performative gentleness reserved for the very old and the very ill. And she works her way back with the same furious discipline she brought to every role she ever played. Because for Bette Davis, there is no distinction between survival and performance. Both require showing up. Both require refusing to disappear. She returned to work in 1984. A television film, a small role. The industry watches with the mixture of admiration and pity that it reserves for old stars who refuse to accept their own ending. The reviews are kind, in the way reviews are kind when they are really about courage rather than craft. She does not care about kindness. She cares about the work. In 1987, she attended the Kennedy Center Honors, one of the last major public celebrations of her life. She sits in the audience in Washington and watches as official America pays tribute to what she has meant to the culture. There are speeches, there is applause. There is the particular warmth of a room full of people honoring someone they are slightly relieved is still alive to be honored. She smiles, she waves, she goes home alone. The entourage that once surrounded her, the agents and the directors and the co-stars and the 4 husbands and the children she raised, and the colleagues who crowded her dressing room, and the journalists who built careers on access to her, has thinned to almost nothing. Her son Michael remains loyal and present. Her personal assistant, Catherine Cermak, a young woman who entered her life in the early 1980s, becomes in these final years the closest thing she has to a constant companion. Her daughter BD is gone. The wound from that book, from those public accusations, from the specific betrayal of a child putting a price on private pain never closes. Mother and daughter do not speak. They will not speak again. And so she keeps working, not because Hollywood is calling with the parts she deserves, but because the alternative is sitting in a quiet room with the full weight of her life pressing down on her chest. And Bette Davis has never been able to survive stillness. In September 1989, she traveled to Spain for the San Sebastian Film Festival, where she was to receive a Lifetime Achievement tribute. She makes the journey with Catherine Cermak. No family, no studio representation, just an old woman and her assistant crossing an ocean so that a foreign film festival can give her what her own country gave her decades ago and then slowly take back. The tribute is genuine. The audience gives her a standing ovation that lasts long enough to mean something. She stands at the podium, one side of her face still carrying the mark of the stroke. And she is still, unmistakably, entirely herself. The eyes that launched 1,000 profiles and inspired a pop song and terrified 4 husbands and dismantled a studio system are still the same eyes. Still watching, still daring you to look away. She flies from Spain to Paris. She checks into a hotel in Neuilly-sur-Seine. She is tired in a way that has stopped being temporary. On October 6, 1989, Bette Davis died of metastatic breast cancer. She is 81 years old. Catherine Cermak is with her. No one else. The tributes come immediately and from everywhere. Newspapers run full front pages. Hollywood issues statements. The American Film Institute, which gave her its Lifetime Achievement Award 12 years earlier, releases a statement calling her irreplaceable. The Academy, which nominated her 10 times and gave her 2 Oscars, mourns publicly and at length. All of it is true. All of it arrives too late. She spent 60 years making herself impossible to forget. And she died in a hotel room in a foreign city with one person holding her hand. That is the whole story. That is the cost. And somewhere in the silence, after the tributes fade and the newspapers yellow, and the next generation of stars takes its place under the lights, that cost sits uncollected, unpaid, and permanent. And that is the story of Bette Davis. Not the version Hollywood wanted you to know. Not the polished retrospective with the golden light and the carefully selected clip reel. The real version. The one where the greatest actress who ever lived dies alone in a Paris hotel room while the industry she spent 60 years fighting is already preparing its next press release. If this video made you feel something tonight, I want to know about it. Drop a comment below and tell me which part of her story hit you the hardest. Was it the little girl in Lowell whose father walked out without looking back? Was it the woman who stood in a British courtroom and told a studio that she was a human being, not a property? Or was it the mother sitting in a rehabilitation room, learning to hold a pen again, reading the book her own daughter wrote to destroy her? Tell me. I read every single one. If you are new here, welcome to the darkest corner of Hollywood history. And this channel exists because these stories deserve to be told completely, without the studio gloss and without the careful omissions. Every week we go back into the archive and we pull out the names that time tried to bury. The stars who burned too bright and paid too much and left too quietly. Hit the subscribe button if you want to be here for the next one. Share this video with someone who thinks they already know everything about old Hollywood, because I promise you they do not. And if you want to go deeper, if you want access to the extended research, the additional sources, the stories that are too long for a single video, the link to our Patreon is in the description below. Every person who supports this channel keeps these stories alive. And these stories deserve to be alive. We will be back next week with another name, another life, another reckoning. Until then, take care of yourselves. Remember that behind every legend is a person who simply wanted to be seen.